The idea that we have to double food production by 2050 to feed the 9 billion people, it's the most worrying thing of all.
Feeding the growing population without further destroying the environment is one of the greatest challenges of our time.
Farmers around the world are pushing the limits to increase food production, often with devastating effects.
We have more pests now than we had 10 years ago.
Agriculture is by far the biggest impact that humans have on the environment.
It's really important to move towards less toxic chemicals, less toxic inputs, and that's something that scientists are working towards.
Could science really solve the upcoming food crisis? Or do organic farmers hold the key to feed a hungry planet?
We have a
global food supply chain that has become very fragile.
Considering such an increasingly critical situation, how could we manage to feed another 2 billion people?
We have to solve those problems, or else a lot of people are going to die.
Fertile land, hot and humid, perfect conditions for agriculture. The northeast of Tanzania could provide enough food for the 2.2 million people who live here. It is one of many African regions which has the potential of becoming a major exporter of food. Could the Black Continent become the next breadbasket of our planet? In Tanzania, 80% of the population are small-scale farmers like Agnes and Abdallah Dese. 3 years ago, they started to adapt new methods of farming. They buy better seeds and fertilizer. For their maize and peas, they are now also using pesticides. They hope that these investments will pay off in a better harvest and that the income will allow them to become more independent.
We sell our peas and so send our children to school. Last year, we were even able to save some money. With God's blessing, we will soon be able to buy a motorbike, as we don't have a means of transport.
For this dream to come true, they were trained to spray pesticides in their fields. Abdallah calls them medicine, because for him they're like a miracle drug that cures the plants.
We really suffered in the past. The harvests were low and sometimes we ended up with not enough to feed ourselves. This medicine makes the corn plant to grow much higher, and the colors just wonderful.
AGRA, the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, has opened training centers all over the country to introduce modern farming methods to small-scale farmers like Abdullah and Agnes. Their vision: to combine high-yield seeds, synthetic fertilizers and pesticides in order to increase the return on a given piece of land. William Levla works for the initiative and has organized a meeting to teach the local farmers about a new variety of pea seed.
Let me explain. This is the seed we're talking about. What's the seed called again? Mali, right. This type of pea is used a lot and will bring you more profit than any other variety.
By adapting these intensive farming methods to Tanzania, AGRA has achieved a rapid and steep increase in its harvests. A key factor for this success has been the introduction of a seed category that is used by most farmers around the world. They are called hybrids. Hybrids are developed through a specific controlled genetic crossing of desirable traits of a female and a male plant. These favorable characteristics could be disease resistance, drought resistance, or as in most cases, higher yielding. But hybrids have one key disadvantage. The desired traits appear only in the first generation. If farmers want to replant the seed in the following season, the yield, for example, will shrink below average. So in order to keep the looked-for features, farmers have to buy new seeds every season from a seed company. This investment usually pays off.
Taona kwamba eka moja
Our
wanavuna
farmers can now
mahindi
harvest 8
gunia
to 10 bags of
8 hadi
maize
10,
and between
na wakati huo
6
huo
to 8
anapokuja
bags
kuvuna
of peas
mbaazi
on the same
anapata
acre
gunia
of
6
land.
hadi 8
This is
kwa
almost
eka moja.
twice as much as
Tofauti
before
kabisa
the Agra
na
project started
kabla ya
here.
mradi wa Agra.
But there are also critics. Janet Marot runs the organization Sustainable Agriculture Tanzania, which helps 300 farmers to adapt to organic farming. It is a counter-movement to Agra.
The Agra initiative is very big and it's very well received by our government. But in reality, in the ground, for me, it's not a dream even. For me, it's an over-ambitious initiative, which does not really, it's not built on foundations and real situations of farmers in Tanzania.
Janet believes that organic agriculture is a much better approach. It has low costs and just uses local resources to provide food security for the families. Her main concern about the Agra initiative is the lax handling of toxic chemicals.
When they talk about pesticide use and safe pesticide use, if that's what they try to talk about, that farmers have to have overalls, gloves, masks, and gumboots. How many farmers will have this? So if they use a pesticide, most of the times they use it without being protected, without having any of this protective gear.
By adopting new seeds and chemicals, African farmers are able to increase yields to feed their growing population. But how will the food supply in Africa progress in the long term? 50 years ago, India's wheat production rocketed by a factor of 10 using new agricultural methods, including pesticides and synthetic fertilizers. But then a shadow fell on this Indian success story. Now there are farmers and consumers who pay a high price for the rapid increase in food production. Today, large parts of the fertile land in the north of India are depleted. The problem? Many farmers have embraced the new chemicals without understanding the importance of dosage. They still believe the more chemicals they apply on the fields, the more yield they will get. But this is a vicious misunderstanding. Pesticide misuse is no longer just a problem of the farmers. It has arrived at the heart of the Punjabi society. In the last decades, these women have seen their loved ones suffer from more and more mysterious diseases.
There are pregnancy problems, the fetus does not grow, and infants don't develop properly. Our eyes hurt, and we often suffer from headaches. Around us, there are also serious diseases like cancer, heart attacks. People are becoming mentally challenged, and it is all because of the food.
Every evening at around 9 o'clock, a group of people gather at the Bathinda station to wait for their night train. The locals call it the cancer train. The name is derived from its passengers because many of them suffer from various types of cancer. Almost too sick to travel, they are accepting a 7-hour journey to arrive at Bikaner in the neighboring state Rajasthan. It's the only place where they can receive medical treatment. Dr. Amar Singh takes care of many of the cancer patients. He is very concerned how Indian agriculture is making people sick.
Punjab is having a highly toxic water, a highly toxic earth and highly toxic food chain. And of course, as a doctor, I'm saying to my patients, whenever the farmer come to me, I'll tell him that just keep some piece of land for yourself. It's a proved thing that organic farming is a sustainable, and it's the only way in which the world can be saved from the toxicity and from the food shortage.
Located in the heart of India, the organic agriculture company BioRe offers an alternative approach. For the last 25 years, they have been helping farmers who want to grow food organically, with no synthetic fertilizers and no pesticides. Most of the farmers in the region are still using chemical farming methods. They are anxious that organic farming will not provide enough yield and income. But long-term studies suggest that even when their yields first decline, the farmers still find good reasons to go organic. These wheat fields have gone through a typical organic transformation. When synthetic fertilizer, herbicides and pesticides were banned on these fields, the harvest dropped significantly. But Dado Singh Chauhan, the owner of the field, decided to be patient.
थोड़े दिन तक तो नुकसान हुआ, इसके बाद भी अपने को फायदा धीरे-धीरे मिलने लगा और खर्च कम लगा और फायदा ज़्यादा मिला। ये जो रासायनिक खेती है, जो करते हैं फर्टिलाइजर दूसरे लोग जो है, इनमें खर्च ज़्यादा लगता है। उत्पादन अगर कुंटल 50 किलो ज़्यादा भी हुआ, तो अपना ऑर्गेनिक का मतलब खर्च कम रहता है, तो उसको कुल मिला के उसका खर्चा जोड़ते हैं। तो ऑर्गेनिक मतलब जो है उससे कहीं भी अपने को बीघे का 500 या 1000 रुपए कुंटल का ज़्यादा ही मुनाफा मिलता है या उत्पादन होता है उसका।
The high costs of chemical farming that provides just a moderate increase in yield is probably the reason why organic farming is on the rise in Madhya Pradesh. In addition, where rural communities have no lobby, no rights and fight for survival, organic farmers can decide at least to avoid the risks of handling toxic chemicals.
और मैं भी बहुत खुश हूँ और
I think organic farming should be adopted in the whole region. We need to protect ourselves from these chemicals so that every family can live happy and free from diseases.
जो कर रहे हैं इनसे मतलब बचे।
Could organic agriculture with a lower yield meet the world's growing food needs? India seems like a risky testbed. Nowhere else in the world is the race for food more critical than here. The country is home to 1.2 billion people, and by 2050, its population is expected to grow up to 1.8 billion. Already today, 1 in 3 children goes to bed hungry. Ralf Sudhoff, director of the UN World Food Programme Germany, has found out that food supply can even decide on war and peace.
We have a global food supply chain
that has become very fragile, much more than in the past decades. In 2008, there was an explosion of the food prices as many harvests around the world declined for various reasons, while the demand for food was continuously on the rise. There is more wealth in the emerging countries, there's an increase in population, and there are biofuels. This has contributed to an imbalance between supply and demand, and all of a sudden the food prices increased significantly. Many countries then banned the export on foods, and for this reason the prices exploded by 200%, 300%, 400%, and the poorest of the poor didn't have any more access to food products.
In 2011, another revolt started in the Arab world. It was an outcry of the people against injustice and disaffection. But the story really begins 6 months earlier and reveals a new perspective on the Arab Spring. In late 2010, the 3 main exporters of wheat suffered a massive crop failure. droughts in Russia, droughts and floods in Australia, and a severe drought in China had a massive impact on the global wheat supply. The consequence, bread prices skyrocketed in Egypt. And in Tunisia, where the Arab Spring started, 50% of the local wheat harvest had failed and worsened the situation.
Das verdeutlichte,
This illustrates that
dass
today's
heute die
world
Welternährung
food
längst nicht
supply
mehr so
is
gesichert ist
much
wie
more
vielleicht noch
insecure
vor
than
20
20 years
Jahren, wo wir
ago,
massivste
when many
Überschüsse in allen
countries had
Ländern hatten,
large surpluses.
sondern
Supply and demand
Angebot
are
und
now
Nachfrage,
more or less in
Ernten
balance,
und
but
Bedarf
this
sind
shows
ungefähr
that the
im
entire
Einklang,
system
was
could
aber dazu
collapse
führt,
when there's a
dass sobald
large
eine
crop
große Ernte
failure
mal
in one
ausfällt, das
region.
ganze System zusammenbrechen kann.
Could Brazil host the next food crisis? Aggressive new pests and weeds are invading the fields and destroy parts of the crops. It's an emergency with a global impact, as the country provides a third of the world's soybean supply. Eduardo Orlandini worries about the future.
Espaçamento tá tudo certo.
The weeds harm
Só
my
que o que judiou
soybeans.
bastante,
The
que a erva
plants don't
daninha
get enough
judiou,
nutrients.
não
The
deixou ela
caterpillars
nutrir bem.
also harm the
A
plants.
lagarta judiou
That's
bastante.
what is happening. Therefore,
Por isso
the
que não vai dar
harvest
bem, né?
will not
Vai
be good.
dar menos.
30
Vai
years
dar mais.
ago, when we didn't
Se
use
fosse há
these
30 anos
pesticides
atrás
and
que não
herbicides,
usava
our yield was
inseticida
much better.
e herbicida era muito pouquinho, você sobrava muito mais, né?
Eduardo was once growing only organic food before he embraced the promises of intensive farming. In 2005, he planted a soybean that is resistant against the Monsanto herbicide, Roundup Ready. This crop promised higher yields, less use of pesticides, and therefore a better income. But over the years, things turned out very differently. Pests and weeds have slowly developed resistances. As a result, Eduardo has been using more and more toxic chemicals. Within the last 10 years, the amount of pesticides and herbicides has tripled, but his yield is still in decline.
Ela tem bastante
We have a
falha,
major loss of harvest and
uma soja que
won't
não vai
sell
render
many
muito. Deve
soybeans.
chegar ali nos
We'll harvest
30,
about 30 to 38 bags per hectare.
38 por
That's
hectare,
pretty
mais ou
bad.
menos, seria
We
mais ou
would
menos
need
isso aí.
much more.
Não é bom, precisaria
50
ser mais.
bags or
Tinha que
more
passar
would
de
be good.
50 para ser bom, né?
The family farm of the Orlandinis goes back for generations. Apart from the soybeans, Eduardo also has milk cows and some fruit trees. But he struggles to compete against the big farms that can easily cultivate 1,000 times more land. The pressure on food prices pushes farmers like Eduardo out of business.
Vamos ali!
Eduardo's income is barely high enough to support him and his parents.
Porque nós
We have
desequilibramos muito.
created an imbalance
E
on
agora
our
nós estamos pagando por
fields.
isso aí.
Now
E vamos
we
cada
have
dia
to pay
pagar
the
mais.
price for it.
Sabudo aquele meu lá, senão não vai ficar forte. Porque ele não veio pra cá, ele não tá de aplicação.
Da cachuva, cadê? Ela não veio?
The large soy farms can still cope with the pests and lower yields. They have increased their cultivated land and use more chemicals to compensate the loss. As a result, 90 million tons of the green gold were harvested in 2014. Brazil is the world's leading exporter of soy. This boom is a direct consequence of the increasing appetite for meat, as soy is a cheap protein source for animal feed around the world. More than 1/3 is shipped to Europe and China, but the continuous run on soy has dangerous side effects. Since 2008, Brazil is the world's top consumer of pesticides. This is directly linked to the increased cultivation of a special breed of genetically modified crops. The most widely used is the Roundup Ready soybean from Monsanto, altered to withstand the glyphosate-based herbicide. The scientists take advantage of the characteristics of a soil bacterium, which is naturally resistant to glyphosate due to a special enzyme. This desired property has been artificially added to the genes of the soy plant. The gene allows the growing crop to be sprayed with glyphosate, killing the surrounding weeds, but allowing the crop to survive. But now farmers complain about former crop plants like maize that are resistant to the herbicide and grow like a weed in their fields. They are called superweeds. Antonio Andrioli has been studying the impact on Brazilian agriculture. He fears that intensive farming has reached its limits. He graduated in Germany and came back to Brazil to fight and campaign against the cause of this agricultural disaster.
There is a trend to spray more and more toxins. Now, even to destroy a corn plant, which actually is an agricultural crop. But in monocultures, where biodiversity is not allowed, we're seeing an increasing use of toxins to kill plants that are resistant to glyphosate.
To secure food supply, Monsanto is now developing new seed varieties that are resistant to even more toxic substances than glyphosate. The new plants should withstand 2,4-D, a substance better known from the defoliant Agent Orange used in the Vietnam War.
Nothing will change in the next 30, 40 or 50 years. The fertility of the soil will reduce significantly, perhaps even leading to a desert. The farmlands and the soil in Brazil will be lost for agriculture. We will have increasing problems with the food supply, and more diseases will arise.
If the demand for Brazilian animal feed does not go down, this scenario could become a harsh reality. The White Hart Brew Pub in London's East End provides a new perspective on the production of animal feed. Could beer make us independent from soybean imports? The answer lies beneath the pub, in the small microbrewery run by Simon McCabe.
We get malted barley to extract the sugar. Once we've done that, the grain is what we call spent. So it's no good to us anymore. We've taken what we need from it, the sugar. So we put it back in the sacks. So it's wet, spent grain, and then we have a problem what to do with it. So the best thing to do is animal feed. So there's a couple of options that we have. Stepney City Farm is a great option for us. They're local, and it's spent grain makes great pig feed.
Animal feed converted from waste. It is a win-win situation for both the brewery, the farm, and the environment. Stepney City Farm, whose prime role is to educate people, has embraced the idea of recycling waste. But environmentalist Tristram Stewart sees a great potential also for larger farms in the countryside.
Europe is massively dependent on imports of protein from overseas, and at the same time, we waste millions of tons of perfectly good protein in food that goes off into the waste stream. The problem is that the system is not set up with the primary objective of feeding people. The system is set up with the primary objective of making money.
If agriculture is ruled by money, animal feed for free could be a promising concept. In 2012, Tristram launched the project The Pig Idea that aims to return to the ancient practice of recycling food waste for livestock feed.
That's probably enough, isn't it?
Yeah. Should we do the mixing up?
This method is partially banned by European law due to an outbreak of foot and mouth disease that was linked to feeding unprocessed food waste to pigs.
Here are pigs.
But Tristram campaigns relentlessly for lifting this ban, as the impact could be massive. The United Nations estimate that feeding livestock with food waste, instead of using soybean or maize, could liberate enough resources to feed an additional 3 billion people.
what you really should be looking at is what are the economic benefits in 5, 10, 20 years? Because the global trend has been and will continue to be a gradual escalation in the price of livestock feed. We don't have enough land, we don't have enough food to cater for the massive growth in demand for meat and dairy products globally.
Could some tough political decisions help to increase food production? In southern India, an agricultural revolution is underway. The entire state of Kerala will be converting to organic farming by the end of 2016. But how could this secure the food supply for the 35 million people who live in Kerala? Matthew Valikavumkar has been growing cashews and coconuts organically for 8 years. The harvests are acceptable, but initially his income was very low, as organic products don't sell at a premium price. But 4 years ago, Matthew joined a local organization that supports fair trade for agricultural products.
I sell my cashew nuts to the Fair Trade Alliance, Kerala. They pay a fixed price for the cashews and for the coconuts. So now I get a higher price. That's a big and welcome change.
But how could fair trade improve the yield? When Matthew's farm converted to organic farming, it faced a significant yield drop. But over time, the soil was enriched with natural nutrients and the yield increased. A fair price helps farmers to get through this difficult starting phase and work on long-term sustainable measures. According to Tommy Matthew, the additional money pushes organic yields close to conventional levels.
A fair price is the best organic manure. In fact, if you ask me what's the biggest impediment to the rapid conversion of conventional or chemical farmland to organic farming, I would say remunerative prices will be the key to the transition.
The Fair Trade Alliance Kerala is based in Kozhikode. A network of more than 4,000 organic farmers supplies the city with their fair-traded products. In the city centre, Tommy runs his own organic store. The shop offers grains, coffee, vegetables, and a wide selection of spices, all cultivated in India's homestead farming tradition.
The homestead had a variety of crops because it was not necessarily the market that decided what must be grown in your homestead. It was your kitchen that decided what must be primarily grown. The organic farmers in Kerala, the organic farmers that I work with, member farmers of Fair Trade Alliance Kerala, have pledged to recapture this homestead farming tradition.
This is a new radical approach in agriculture. To offer a healthy diet, protect the environment, and provide long-term food security for millions of people. In the industrial world, labor is expensive and farmland limited. Most farmers look for technological solutions to win the food race with sustainable agriculture. They use their land intensively and apply modern machinery to optimize the cultivation of hybrid seeds on large fields with modern pesticides and synthetic fertilizer. For them, improving agriculture means increasing yield and reducing the environmental impact at the same time. This tractor has infrared sensors that can measure the nitrogen content that has already been absorbed by the crops. The system then calculates the amount of nitrogen that still needs to be added on each plant. This way of optimizing resources is a new trend in agriculture called precision farming. Kai Uwe Anke cultivates 170 hectares of land and produces enough calories to feed around 500 people. Due to the industrialization of agriculture, farmers in Germany were able to quadruple their yields in the past 60 years. Such a steep rate of productivity is a matter of the past. Still, farmers try to improve the yield in a sustainable way. But what difference can precision farming make?
Ich glaube, dass wir in Zukunft vermehrt auf solche Systeme setzen müssen, einfach nachhaltiger produzieren zu können weltweit. Wir haben schon etwa 10 bis 15 Kilogramm Stickstoff einsparen können im Winterweizen und außerdem den Ertrag um 2% etwas steigern.
These methods of precision farming can be used not only to optimize the dosage of fertilizers, but also of pesticides. This new approach can reduce the amount of chemicals applied on the field and achieve a small increase in yields. But are there other scientific solutions which could boost food production to meet projected demand? The Indian state of Kerala rejects intensive farming altogether and builds on fair trade and organic food. But could such a traditional approach of farming feed our planet? James Gerber from the Global Landscape Initiative has analyzed the global farming situation at his office at the University of Minnesota. His team has searched for viable options to meet the increasing demand for food on our planet. It is an enormous challenge.
We can't really increase farmlands appreciably. There just isn't much more land. We're already using all of the good land. What land is left is desert, or is rock, is just flat out unsuitable.
To make land use more efficient, Gerber evaluates satellite data. These images have helped him to identify specific regions where farmland could be cultivated much more effectively. These areas could play a key role in securing the global food supply.
And then one thing that's interesting is that there are really a few places, we call them leverage points, where a small intervention could have a big difference. If you could close those yield gaps on just 5% of cultivated land, that could produce enough food to feed 850 million people.
One of these areas with a significant yield gap are the Uluguru Mountains in the north of Tanzania. At a height of 2,000 meters, the people of the Luguru tribe have been cultivating crops for more than 300 years. The favorable climate allows the Luguru to grow crops throughout the year. In addition, the soil in the mountains is particularly fertile. But in the past, heavy rainfall has destroyed the fields and the harvests over and over again. They were simply washed down the valleys. In the last 2 years, Ugo Kunguru from the organization Sustainable Agriculture Tanzania has shown them how to prevent soil erosion.
Na pia kwenye namna kuandaa shamba, kwa sababu hapa ni penye miteremko mikali kama mnavyoona.
First and foremost, we regulate the speed of water, and by doing so, we control soil erosion. This way, the top layer of soil will stay in the field and supply the crops with nutrients. I'm very confident that this method will help the farmers to increase their productivity.
Kuzuia mmomonyoko wa udongo wa juu ambao ndo tabaka la juu lenye udongo wenye rutuba ambao unaweza ukastawisha mazao.
The people of Luguru have also learned how to use the river for their irrigation system without any expensive investments. They also work without pesticides, without synthetic fertilizers, and just use their traditional seeds on the terraces. Cultivated this way, the mountain farmers could feed the entire valley with more than 2 million people. But it is a farming method that requires patience.
For the farmers here in the mountain, at least the first year, is difficult because they have to put all this organic matter in the soil. They have to plant all the legumes for the soil. And then the second year is much better. And by the third year, they have yield increase much more than how they had when they did conventional agriculture.
Also in the Plain Valley, the movement for sustainable and organic farming finds more and more supporters. Elizabeth Karganda once trusted in chemical farming, but then the soil became depleted and the yields shrank. Only a few months ago, she converted to organic farming.
We are still at the beginning, but organic farming seems to have clear benefits because the costs are very low, and it is much healthier for my family. In addition, all I need for the cultivation is readily available. Completely different to the past, when we had to buy everything. Now I can grow vegetables by myself, and I can even sell some of them.
In order to become a successful organic farmer, Elizabeth needs to acquire new skills. Ugo Kunguru provides courses where Elizabeth and other small-scale farmers learn how they can improve their yields in a sustainable way. Today, the group learns how they can produce their own organic fertilizer. It is based on cow dung.
It is important to dilute the manure because the high concentration can burn the crops. Is that clear?
These women in Tanzania have found a way for a healthy and sustainable agriculture. To take a bit less from the land, but also put less strain on the environment and on their health. They all work together towards the Kilimo Hai, which means organic farming. Raul Adamczak works on the student farm of the University of California in Davis. The farm provides an insight to the limits of organic farming as it relies on natural resources and traditional farming practices. Sometimes organic farmers are helpless when it comes to pests and diseases. For example, this zucchini field has been attacked by an aggressive soil-borne virus that eats the roots of the plants.
If you look down this row, we have healthy zucchinis growing along there, and you get to this part of the bed and they start to look worse and worse and worse, and you reach a point where they just look really bad. And if you pull one up, this is the size of it when we put it in, and there are no roots growing out of this at all. For organic growers, it's tricky. There are some crops you can grow that are resistant to the symphyalins. We try and plant tomatoes as one of the crops in the rotation, and then we'll grow other crops in rotation that we know have some resistance to the symphyalins. But it often means that there's some crops that we just can't grow in that ground.
Despite these setbacks, Raul is a passionate organic grower with an open mind for new ideas. If society wants to produce more organic food, it will need the help of science.
If you want to grow crops, they're going to have to be drought tolerant, salt tolerant, flood tolerant, and Genetic engineering is going to be a useful tool in achieving those goals.
The University of Davis is known for its competence in agricultural sciences. Raoul's wife is plant geneticist Pamela Ronald. For the last 20 years, she has been investigating how yields in rice could be improved by gene modification. Rice is the most important global food crop and therefore critical for the world's food supply.
It's estimated that 4 million tons of rice, enough to feed 30 million people, is lost every year to flooding. So plant geneticists for many years and breeders have been studying a very interesting ancient variety of rice called a flood-tolerant rice.
The basis of the submergence-tolerant rice was an ancient rice strain that farmers knew could survive a long period of time underwater. But this rice variety had a poor yield and a bad flavor. Scientists have identified and isolated the genes for flood resistance. Using a technique called precision breeding, they have inserted the flood-tolerant gene into another rice variety with a high yield and good flavor. The result was the rice variety called Sub 1. In 2010, scientists of the International Rice Research Institute have planted the new Sub 1 rice on test fields in Bangladesh, a country that is regularly hit by serious flooding. Most of the cultivated rice varieties die after 3 days when they are submerged. The new flood-tolerant rice is different. It is able to survive 17 days underwater and also provides an impressive yield.
Last year, they estimate that 4 million farmers grew the flood-tolerant rice. And I should say that the farmers growing the flood-tolerant rice see a threefold increase in yield in times of flooding. So it's very useful for farmers.
The flood-tolerant rice is one example where genetic engineering was able to provide a much better crop and save millions from hunger. This type of research is usually done by universities who don't need to make a profit on their inventions. It's research in the public's interest and in the tradition of ancient plant breeding.
Everything we eat has been genetically altered, and virtually nothing we eat would ever have occurred in nature. Everything has been very highly manipulated by breeders and scientists for 10,000 years.
Using traditional breeding methods, humans have been able to feed themselves for centuries. But now, as the global population is exploding, breeders also need to increase their pace in finding better crops, fast. Wilhelm Gruysum, a plant biotechnologist from Switzerland, has come to the Leibniz Institute of Plant Genetics and Crop Plant Research to exchange views. His concern: the diversity of cultivated food crops is in a steep decline.
We have tried to bring about 7,000 different types of plants or crops into production. Of course, many of those have not worked. Today, we have about 150 of those 7,000 plants that are really in agricultural production, that contribute to our diet. And of those 150, there's only about 10 crop types that produce about 95% of the calories in the world.
Tens of thousands of old seed varieties from all over the planet are stored here at -18 degrees Celsius, in Europe's largest seed bank. They are not kept to produce food, but to store the genetic information of the century-old varieties.
We keep these samples for the future plant breeding and future food supply of the world's population. Because we don't know yet which material will become important, that's why we store this large reserve in the seed bank.
The genetic information of most varieties is still encoded in the seed grains and unknown to breeders or scientists. The employees of the seed bank are the caretakers of this genetic information. The problem: seeds lose their ability to germinate after several decades. So all varieties need to be planted, observed, and harvested in regular intervals. It is an enormous task that one day could help to create new crops to increase global food production. Wilhelm Grüssem has a vision to turn this living library into a digital archive. What if all this genetic information and plant characteristics could be digitized and made accessible in a virtual gene bank?
At the end, you have a resource for breeders, for scientists, for many other individuals who are interested in genetic networks. That is information then that you have available forever, okay? And that you can use to not only breed new plants, but to also understand how the traits that we are interested in, what their molecular basis is.
Grüssem's virtual gene bank is still only in the conceptual phase, so breeders continue to use the traditional trial and error method of crossing varieties, but in a high-tech way. In order to optimize crossbreeding, the samples of the germinated plants are sent to a laboratory for gene analysis. Here, the scientists want to find out whether a desired gene, for example for a disease resistance, is present in the crop. This way, Antje Rohde and her team are using the tools of genetic engineering without actually altering the DNA of the plants.
We have to isolate the DNA and then from that DNA amplify signals that tell us whether the gene is there or not. So we can very early on look into the genomes of those plants and see whether actually the loci or genes that are responsible for being resistant to a disease are present or not. And in that sense, we help them select earlier, quicker, or in bigger numbers.
Before genetic tools were used in breeding, the process of finding a new variety lasted 10 to 15 years. Now the same results can be achieved in just 2 generations. To speed up the process in finding better seeds with better characteristics, scientists are using gene technologies in different ways. In Europe, gene analyzing tools are used to accelerate the traditional breeding process. In Bangladesh, geneticists have created a flood-tolerant rice that has tripled yields during flood events. However, many farmers don't have access to these modern breeding techniques. They need to rely on simple and inexpensive technologies to improve their yield on a given piece of land. Can all these different measures secure the world's food supply and feed 9 billion people by 2050? We need to make sure that the growth of the population does not overtake our food production. And to do this, many different solutions need to be combined.
To produce food in the longer run, to sustain themselves and future generations, we need to practice agriculture that is friendly for the environment, that is healthy for the people, that gives people incomes, and with the incomes, people are able to use it for other important and necessary needs.
We should produce food more locally and more sustainably and support small-scale farmers which are able to supply the consumers in their region. This way, we can improve the quality of life of both the farmers and the consumers.
At the end of the day, the solutions can't just come from industrial farming, can't just come from organic farming, can't just come from agroecological approaches, but strong aspects of all of those methods of farming will have to be brought together to improve yields in a sustainable way.